All right, let's imagine something pretty crazy.
Okay.
You're 13 years old.
Uh-huh.
You just inherited the biggest empire in the world,
Wow.
Constantinople, 1603.
Okay.
The Ottoman throne is yours,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a terrifying tradition. To really cement your power, you got to get rid of any threats,
Okay.
starting with your own brother.
Gosh.
Yeah, so today we are diving into the story of Mustafa,
Okay.
a pretty much forgotten Ottoman prince.
Mm.
This guy's life was completely shaped by this brutal reality.
Wow.
And we are pulling all this from a really, really captivating episode of the Noble Blood podcast.
Yeah, it's so interesting how the story kind of flips the script on the typical power grab thing.
Right.
We're not looking at some prince who's trying to, like, get to the top.
Yeah.
We're looking at a prince who's basically imprisoned by the system.
Right. Yeah, he's trapped by the very thing that makes him powerful.
Exactly.
So, okay, let's set the scene here. Ottoman fratricide.
Yeah.
It's chilling.
Yeah.
Ahmed's father, Mehmed III, killed 19 of his brothers
Oh, my goodness.
to make sure he got the throne.
Wow.
19.
That's a lot of
It's
brothers.
crazy. Makes you think, what does that do to a person
Right.
to have to make that
And
choice?
to live with that knowledge, yeah.
To live with that, yeah.
I think it really shows you that the worldview at the time was that power was everything.
Yeah.
And any threat to that power, even family,
Right.
had to be removed.
Yeah.
Which makes it even more amazing that Ahmed was like, no, I'm not going to kill my brother.
Right. It's huge.
Yeah, he's like breaking with centuries of tradition,
Yeah.
and he spares Mustafa.
Yeah. And Mustafa basically disappears from the historical record for a while.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Ahmed's got his own problems.
Yeah.
Illness, rebellions, ruling this giant empire as a teenager.
Yeah.
He manages to leave his mark, though.
He does.
He commissions that amazing blue mosque.
Yeah.
But even that shows you how power was always at play in the background.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
We got to remember, Ahmed's court wasn't just him.
Mhm.
Right, you got these powerful figures like the Grand Mufti.
Mm-hmm.
He's the highest religious authority in the empire.
Yep.
Kind of like the Supreme Court justice for like matters of faith.
Okay, so serious power.
Serious power. And then you also have the chief eunuch Mustafa Ah.
I can already sense some serious palace intrigue brewing here.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And here's something kind of creepy.
Okay.
The Blue Mosque has this inscription that praises Ahmed and D. Mustafa Ah.
Whoa.
Like they're equals.
Yeah.
It's like this little hint at all the power struggles that are going on under the surface.
Oh, wow. That's a good catch.
So while Ahmed's building mosques and fighting rebellions,
Mm-hmm.
his brother Mustafa is stuck in the cafes.
The what?
The cafes. It's basically like a fancy prison in the palace.
Oh, wow. So he's like living in a gilded cage?
Yeah, and imagine what that does to your mind.
Yeah.
You're isolated, always uncertain. You never know if you're going to make it to tomorrow.
Yeah, that's a recipe for anxiety and paranoia.
Sure.
And that's when those rumors start popping up about Mustafa being, quote unquote, mad.
Right, but how much of that was real?
Right.
And how much of it was people whispering because they saw him as a threat?
Right. Or as a pawn.
Yeah,
Like they could
Yeah.
manipulate him.
That's the big question. Was he really mad, or was that a story pushed by people who wanted to control him?
To discredit him.
Exactly.
And we have these accounts that say he's unstable,
Yeah.
but then others say it was a smear campaign.
Mm,
It's like trying to put together a puzzle where half the pieces are missing,
right.
and the ones you have might be from a completely different puzzle.
Yeah, it's a mess.
Yeah.
And here's something else that makes it even more complicated.
Okay.
Some people thought Mustafa's madness was actually like a holy thing.
Really?
Yeah, like they thought his weird behavior was a sign from God.
Wow.
That adds a whole other layer to his story.
Yeah.
And it kind of foreshadows how people are going to see him later on.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so we've got Ahmed. He's young. He's a sultan. He's dealing with a lot of dangerous stuff.
Yeah.
And then you've got Mustafa. He's locked up, but people haven't forgotten about him.
Right.
And his reputation is all these whispers and rumors.
Yeah.
And then fate steps in.
Oh, boy.
Ahmed dies unexpectedly.
Wow.
And after years in that gilded cage, Mustafa is suddenly the sultan.
It's crazy how things change.
I know.
This totally throws the Ottoman power structure out of whack.
Yeah.
It's like unheard of for a brother to inherit the throne instead of a son.
Right?
And the Grand Mufti sees this as his chance.
Ah.
He makes Mustafa the sultan.
Wow. Talk about a power vacuum.
Totally.
And Mustafa's mother, Halime Sultan.
Right.
She was nobody before,
Yeah.
but now she's a major player.
Big time.
It just goes to show you, even in this super patriarchal system,
Yeah.
women could still have power.
They could.
So Mustafa goes from forgotten prince to sultan.
Yep.
But is he really fit to rule?
That, my friend,
Yeah.
is the question that's going to drive the next part of our deep dive.
I can't wait.
Stay tuned. Things are about to get even more twisted in the Ottoman world.
Oh, man. If you are loving this journey into the Ottoman Empire, hit that subscribe button for the deep dive.
Yes, please do.
We are digging up these hidden histories.
We are.
And exploring the lives of the people who shaped our world.
Yep.
One fascinating story at a time.
One story at a time. So, Mustafa's reign, this is where things get really messy in Ottoman history.
Go ahead.
Shifting alliances, infighting the Sultan's power is slipping.
Yeah.
And Mustafa becomes like a symbol of all this chaos.
It's kind of like a Shakespearean tragedy, right?
Yeah, totally.
You've got this guy who's been through so much, locked up, isolated, the weight of the world on his shoulders, and suddenly he's the most powerful person in the empire.
And the sources we have, they paint a really weird picture of his rule.
Okay.
On one hand, you've got these stories about him acting really strange.
Like what?
Like he'd be in the middle of some official ceremony and just start unraveling his turban. Yeah, or he'd throw coins into the Bosphorus like he was feeding the fish.
That's bizarre.
It is.
But
It's easy to see that and think, okay, this guy's unstable, maybe even mad.
didn't you say earlier we got to be careful about the sources?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Remember Mustafa?
The chief eunuch?
Yeah, he was super powerful when Ahmed was sultan.
Right.
But when Mustafa took over, he was basically pushed aside.
So maybe he had a reason to make Mustafa look bad.
Exactly. We have to think about who benefits from these stories about Mustafa being crazy.
Right. Was it genuine concern, or were they trying to weaken his power?
Exactly.
It makes you wonder if we're too quick to judge these historical figures
Yeah.
based on accounts that might be totally biased.
We only have these little pieces of the puzzle,
Yeah.
and it's hard to know the whole picture.
So even if we take these crazy stories with a grain of salt,
Uh-huh.
we can't deny Mustafa's first reign was a disaster.
Yeah, it was short and full of problems.
And why was that?
Well, I think one big reason was he didn't get the Ottoman system.
What do you mean?
It was all about balance, keeping everyone happy, especially the Janissaries.
The Janissaries, those were the elite soldiers, right?
Right, but they were more than just soldiers. They were like this incredibly powerful political force.
Real?
They had their own goals, their own ambitions.
Wow. So how did they get so powerful?
Their recruitment was really unique.
How so?
They were mainly Christian boys who were converted to Islam,
Okay.
and they were trained from a very young age.
Okay.
That created this strong bond between them, but it also separated them from the rest of Ottoman society.
So they were kind of a state within a state.
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay, so they were a force to be reckoned with.
Oh, yeah, both on the battlefield and in the palace.
So how did they play into Mustafa's downfall?
Well, you got to remember Osman.
Ahmed's son.
Yeah, he'd been sultan briefly before Mustafa's first reign.
Right.
He had all these ideas about reforming the empire.
Like what?
Modernizing the army, for one.
Sounds like a good idea.
Well, the Janissaries didn't think so.
Why not?
They saw it as a threat to their power.
To their way of life.
Exactly.
So Osman's reforms backfired big time.
Big time. Rumors started flying. Tensions rose. And the Janissaries revolted.
Oh, wow.
They stormed the palace demanding Osman's advisors be executed.
That's intense.
It was total chaos. And in all that chaos, they needed someone they could control.
Someone they could manipulate.
Exactly. Someone who would owe them big time.
And that someone was...
Mustafa, still stuck in the cafes.
Can you imagine?
You're pulled out of prison, put on a throne you never wanted.
All because of this unpredictable military force.
Yeah. It was a dangerous position to be in.
No kidding.
The Janissaries had basically staged a coup,
Yeah.
and Mustafa was their puppet.
So Mustafa goes from forgotten prince to sultan.
Yep.
Back to prisoner.
Uh-huh.
And now he's back on the throne thanks to the Janissaries.
Hmm.
But this time it's different.
Totally.
He's not really in control.
He's at the mercy of this volatile military force.
It's amazing how even a sultan's ambition could be crushed by the reality of power.
Yeah, it wasn't enough to just wear the crown.
Right.
You have to play the game. Make alliances, keep powerful people happy.
And know your limits.
Exactly.
And Mustafa, maybe because of his isolation,
Yeah.
or maybe because of who he was,
Maybe.
he just wasn't cut out for it.
And that's what leads to his downfall.
So what happens next? He's sultan again.
Yep.
But he's basically under the Janissaries' thumb.
Right, and things fall apart pretty quickly.
Okay.
His second reign is even more chaotic than the first.
How so?
He's paranoid. He lashes out at anyone he thinks is an enemy.
Does he do anything really bad?
He orders the execution of some of Ahmed's sons.
His own nephews.
Yeah,
That's cold.
it was. Even if some of the stories are exaggerated,
Yeah.
that's a level of ruthlessness that you can't ignore.
And the Imperial Council, they weren't too happy about it, were they?
No, they were already worried about Mustafa.
And about the Janissaries.
Exactly. So they decided to act.
They deposed him again?
They did.
Yeah.
After only 4 months, Mustafa is back in the cafes.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. To go from the highest position to being locked up.
Not once, but twice.
It makes you think about what that does to a person.
And what about the Ottoman Empire?
It just shows how unpredictable power was,
Yeah.
especially in a system like that.
Even with absolute rule, the Sultan wasn't really all powerful.
Right. There were always people fighting for control.
Factions and alliances.
And things could change in an instant.
And Mustafa's story.
Yeah.
That's a glimpse into how that system worked.
The tensions, the power struggles, the human cost of all that ambition.
So what happens to Mustafa after this second time he's deposed?
Well, we'll get to that.
Okay.
We'll explore the final chapter of his story
Yeah.
and talk about what he left behind when we come back for the last part of our deep dive.
Okay, so last we left off, Mustafa was back in the cafes. Twice. A sultan twice deposed. It's almost like something out of Shakespeare.
It really is, and that's not even the end of his story. He lives another 16 years in that gilded cage, like a ghost just kind of haunting the palace.
16 years? That's hard to wrap your head around so close to all that power. But completely shut out, what happened during that time was he just forgotten about.
The sources don't say much. We get these little hints here and there, but nothing major. It seems like he lived a pretty quiet life under guard, but mostly left alone.
You have to wonder what he thought about during all those years. Did he think about what could have been? Did he regret anything? Or maybe he found some peace in all that solitude, away from all the danger and pressure of the court.
We can only guess, but one thing's for sure. Mustafa doesn't make a comeback. He doesn't get executed either. He dies in 1639, still a prisoner of the cafes, almost a footnote in the grand story of the Ottoman Empire.
What a sad ending to a life full of such incredible ups and downs. Twice Sultan, but never really in control of his own fate. It makes you think about what power really means, the expectations, the fine line between wanting it and it destroying you.
And it makes you wonder if we judged Mustafa too harshly. Was he really mad, like some people said, or was he just a victim of his circumstances, a pawn in a bigger game he couldn't control?
The sources don't give us a clear answer. The truth is probably lost to history.
It reminds us that history isn't always black and white. There are always different sides, different interpretations, and the stories we tell about the past are often shaped by the people who wrote them down.
Right? It's not just about finding the facts. It's about figuring out what they mean, wrestling with the parts that don't make sense, trying to understand the human side of these big historical events.
Exactly, and that's what makes studying history so interesting.
And Mustafa's story, even though it might seem like a small part of Ottoman history, gives us this amazing look into a really complex world. It shows us the cracks in the system, the power struggles between the Sultan and everyone else, the price people paid for all that ambition and scheming.
It also makes us think about how we judge these figures from the past. Are we too quick to label them based on information that might be biased or incomplete? Do we really understand what they were going through, the pressures they faced, the impossible choices they had to make?
That's a good point, and it applies to more than just Mustafa's story. It reminds us that history is full of layers and contradictions. It's not a simple story of good guys and bad guys. It's a mix of human experiences, some amazing, some tragic.
And that's what we try to do here at the Deep Dive, to untangle those complicated stories, to shine a light on the parts of history that have been forgotten, to give a voice to the people whose stories haven't been told.
So if you enjoyed this journey into the Ottoman Empire, if you liked uncovering hidden histories and learning about the people who shaped our world, make sure you subscribe to the Deep Dive.
We're always digging into new stuff, finding these amazing stories.
And we'd love for you to come along with us, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.